All right, football at 4. Johnny Mac's in the house. He's on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. XFL this weekend. How much will you watch?
Going
to give it any shot?
It depends if anyone calls me to hang out. Anyone. Doesn't matter who it is. No, listen, I'm excited. A couple of my, me and my buddies been talking about it. I'm definitely intrigued for opening weekend. Is that fair to say, opening weekend?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, we talked about
We're
it
trying
yesterday.
to find a full schedule of when you can watch these games. So you got action tomorrow, 2 o'clock, Seattle, D.C. That's on ABC. So it's easy to find on television.
Yeah.
You got L.A. and Houston on Saturday on Fox.
Okay.
And then on Sunday, you got Tampa, New York on Fox at 2 and St. Louis, Dallas on ESPN at 5.
Nice.
So, I mean, these are on the big networks. You can watch them.
Who's calling these games?
Like real people.
Oh, like actual people. Like of relevance.
Yes. Yeah. Steve Levy, I think, is the ESPN host. I think, is Kurt Menefee doing the Fox games? And I don't know who the ABC main team is, but I know Diana Rossini, I think, is part of the broadcast. I think she's on the sideline for ESPN. So, yeah, they've got
correct.
real, teams doing this. They're not putting out their F teams. They're putting out some high-profile names. I mean, get behind it.
I'm going to watch probably one full game's worth of XFL
Well, it's
throughout the
interesting.
weekend.
A regular football is a 1-4. They're going 2-5.
Yeah, they're changing it up
the trend there.
Yeah, that's a bold strategy.
Johnny Mac's in the house. Do you know who the broadcast teams are, John, for the XFL?
You got some of the names there. I'm just happy it's not Jim Ross and Jesse the Body Ventura. So I think
you mean unhappy?
That's possible. Well, unhappy. Yeah, it could be unhappy.
Yeah.
But I remember Matt Veskurgian was the first voice of the XFL, and that lasted a week before they said they had to get some big name people in. Then came JR, good old JR, and Jesse the Body.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully that doesn't happen this time.
No, they're trying to go with legit style. They got the real broadcast team. ESPN's making a pretty big deal about it, and the games are on ABC as well. You got Steve Levy with Greg McElroy and Tom Loganbill with Diana Rossini on the one game, and then Tom Hart, Joey Galloway, and Pat McAfee.
I was just going to ask you. I was trying to get your attention. I was going to say, how did they not put our boy McAfee on the broadcast?
That is the ESPN
there you go.
broadcast team. So McAfee and Galloway are the analysts. McAfee's going to be down on the field. So there you go. So that's the XFL starting this weekend. 4 games. They're going 2-5 both days. And, I certainly will keep an eye on that. John, I want to start off, though, with some of the NFL news, obviously, that's going on. And we haven't talked a lot about the CBA talks. Gathered together in Los Angeles. They discussed the latest proposal in this collective bargaining agreement. And there was some sense of urgency, I guess, that, the 17-game schedule, is that something that they're trying to get pushed through for next season?
Yeah, that's what all the negotiating has been centered around. This is a 17-game season, so that's what the framework is being done for. I don't think it would be for next season. Remember, the current CBA runs through next season, so ultimately, I don't think they'll try to implement it right away. But that's what all the framework has been about, and obviously that's going to create significant revenue for the league, and that's the whole point. And when you talk about, I always say it's about revenue sharing. That's number one, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down to 101, and then you start talking about the other ancillary issues. So once you agree on that revenue split, and if the players are happy with that, ultimately I think they're going to be happy with it. I don't think we're going to have a strike. I've said that. We're certainly not going to have a strike. We're not going to have a lockout either. I think it's going to get done. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, that's good news. I mean, I remember 2011 was when that lockout was, or was it 12? I think it was 11 when they had the lockout, and that was just miserable for everybody. And obviously, here we are now. This CBA was the one that was agreed upon back then, right?
Yeah. This was the 2011 CBA. And the most interesting thing is about that was there was a lockout, and essentially there was no off season. So when you got to that season, and there were so many dramatic changes from a preparation standpoint, that's when practices got scaled back. That's when two-a-days ended, and you had limitations all throughout the season and the off season. That's when you kind of knew who the good coaches were. You could really, really tell because you got thrown all these changes at the last minute, and the guys who formulated the quickest plan and prepared their teams the best, you could tell the good organizations from the bad organizations.
The one thing, where I know the players seem like they were kind of like the player reps seemed like they were pretty opposed to expand to the 17-game season, and then the owners want to add 47% is the cut currently. They want to boost that up to 48.5 to get them a little bit more money for that extra game, right?
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, the players want to get to 50-50. I do not think they will get there, but that's always the goal.
Now, is that a dual? Is that a dual bye week thing as well?
No, the 17, at least the last formulation was they were still sticking with only one bye week. So, look, I always talk about the NFL talking out of both sides of its mouth when it comes to things like safety issues, and really and to be honest, both sides, when they talk about safety, they're really only talking about one thing, and that's concussions, which is a little bit disingenuous from both sides because there's a lot of other injury issues in what is essentially a really violent game. So you can't say you care about player safety and then say, oh, let's play 17. And really, they wanted 18, to be honest. They want 18. Ultimately. And then from the player standpoint, they're always going to say that, and they're going to get $5 extra billion or whatever, and they're going to agree to it. And that's how it's going to shake out.
All right, so the CBA stuff, that expires, by the way, March of 2021. So this year has no fear of any problems, but you don't believe there will be a problem, but it doesn't expire until March of 2021. Just for the people out there that are wondering, like, whoa, is there any fear that something could happen this year?
No, there's no fear, but there is a sense of urgency to get something done because there's a lot of weird little things that, from a contract standpoint, from things you can't do in the final year of the CBA. So both sides want everything ironed out pretty quickly and far beyond. They don't want to go into next season without an extension because they want to have everything hammered out. So there is a sense of urgency. But, yeah, if worse comes to worse, you don't have to worry about lockout until after next season, and you really never have to worry about strike because despite anything you might hear, 1,700 people aren't giving up high-paying jobs to strike over things like marijuana testing and 10 guys getting in trouble with Roger Goodell. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, all right. So some of the things on the field. Let's take a look at some more players that we have our eye on this offseason. Get your opinion on what's going to happen. Drew Brees, where's he going? What's his deal? Retire, back to the Saints, wild card. What do we got?
I would think back to the Saints. Still playing at a high level. That's still a very good team. If they bring Drew back, they projected to be. I thought they were the best team in the NFC. Obviously got upset in the playoffs, but a lot of talent, and they had some injuries on the defensive side of the ball. So hopefully they can get through things healthier. And they have a lot of question marks at quarterback, not only Drew Brees, but also Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill. But if they really, truly think the window is open, and it is, they should think that way, got to bring Drew Brees back, and I think ultimately they will.
Okay, now you mentioned the other two. They're all free agents. Are you intrigued by Taysom Hill's offseason?
No, I think he'll be back with the Saints, and he'll be the backup ultimately. I think the guy who's leaving is Teddy Bridgewater, and he should get a starting job somewhere. And he deserves a starting job somewhere. So I think that next step in Hill is to be the true backup, and that's how it'll shake out. But I think he's smart enough to know that the grass isn't always greener, that Sean Payton, that coaching staff, has used him brilliantly as sort of a Swiss Army knife type player. The talk of him being a franchise quarterback, nobody in this league is going to look at him as a starter. So there is no better destination for him. It makes sense for both sides, and I think that's how it'll shake out.
How dare you, John? Taysom's my guy.
I got to tell you the truth. I always tell you the truth.
I just think he's intriguing. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say I think he's going to be an elite quarterback, but I do think he's arguably the best football player in the NFL, and I think that he does show flashes and potential to be a legitimate quarterback in the NFL, and maybe I'm just too biased with that assessment, but I don't know. He's just really intriguing to me.
I think you're biased with that assessment.
Yeah, I was
understand
expecting that.
When he's at quarterback now, and you look, he had a great playoff game against Minnesota. He arguably was the best player the Saints had. But understand, he's coming in. Everything's a gimmick. He's coming in as a change of pace. He's not. Nobody's game planning for him. He's not. They take you by surprise. By the way, and Sean Payton's done a wonderful job by that. Well, if he's a starting quarterback, everybody's game planning. You're not taking anyone by surprise. You can't throw the football like Drew Brees. There's a reason.
He does have an arm, though.
Hurt.
He does have an arm, and he does have legitimate tools, and I do agree he's used as a gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys who can throw the football. I'm not.
To be fair, he was not a good passer
like
in college, though. He barely completed 60% of his passes in college. I mean, he was not a
He's
quarterback.
got heart, though.
Right, he was not a quarterback prospect in that draft class.
No. And maybe he can turn into down the road a starting quarterback. I doubt it. But again, it would be much more difficult. And understand, remember when Drew got hurt, Teddy Bridgewater came in. He was the third string quarterback. So a lot of this has to do with leverage. As I said, the Saints are trying to use what leverage they do have, and you say things, well, maybe we'll go with Taysom Hill. Well, yeah, okay, but then you're not going to be a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, 1 year in college, by the way, he ran the ball as the quarterback 246 times for 1,300 yards to kind of show you what kind of quarterback he was in college. He really wasn't a guy who threw the ball very well or all that much when he was at BYU. In fact, his completion percentage is 58% in college. So he's just not an he might have a good arm, but I'm sure Greg Ward has a good arm too.
I'd love to see Greg Ward under center.
I think it would be fun to see for a couple series. That being said,
this is the video gaming of the fan base of the NFL.
Don't lump me into that. I'm not on the Hill can play quarterback in this league bandwagon.
No, I'm half joking when I say it, but I'm a big fan of them.
Gimmicks are great and they're fun, and obviously the Philly Special is the most famous play in Eagles history. But if you do it every week, it loses its. You're not surprising people.
It's no longer special.
True, that as well. Yeah. But the whole point of gimmick plays is to take people by surprise. And the more you do them, the less apt you are to surprise people.
That leaves us to Bridgewater then. Do you feel like he will have a lot of suitors? I'm intrigued by what happens with him because – he had the injury, he didn't play, and then he got a couple of games, and he played good, not great. I mean, he wasn't like setting the world on fire, although they didn't lose. So I'm interested to see
who breaks
the bank for Bridgewater.
Well, I don't think he'll have to break the bank, comparatively speaking. Obviously, you have to pay a lot at that particular position. Ultimately, I do think he'll be a starting quarterback in this league as long as he passed his muster from a medical standpoint. He deserves to be a starting quarterback. He was a starting quarterback before the injuries. He was an ascending quarterback. A lot of people thought Minnesota was going to be a contender that year because of how well Teddy Bridgewater was developing. And then you had the catastrophic injury, and he proved a lot from the health standpoint. And I think that was the biggest question mark people around the league had about him. They know he's a starting level quarterback. You've already seen that. So as long as you're comfortable and think he can hold up from a health standpoint, I mean, that's going to be a good deal for somebody. You're going to get almost a little bit of a discount for a pretty good quarterback. I'm not going to say he's great, but solid guy.
John, this offseason seems like one of the most exciting off seasons the NFL has or will have in quite some time, with a lot of big name free agents, and it seems like there could be legitimate movement of big names, which I think is great for the league.
At the biggest position.
At the biggest position, most importantly, yeah. So which one of those names do you think will have a legitimate chance of wearing a new helmet?
Phillip Rivers. Ultimately, I do think people are this is going to be driving the offseason until the new league year on March 18th, and people are going to say, where's Tom going? Tom Brady, where's Drew Brees going? And ultimately, I don't think they're going anywhere. Tom will be back in New England. Drew will be back in New Orleans. So it will end up not being exciting for people. And I kind of explained that yesterday on the show. I mean, other than if you're in a situation where you need to sell tickets, and really the only team in that situation is the LA Chargers, and you default to business over football sense, you don't want a 40-year-old quarterback, no matter how good they are. To start over in a new offense, in a new situation, that's just awful from a football perspective. So those guys aren't going anywhere. Phillip Rivers is in that same category, 38, 39. Probably shouldn't leave, but I think the Chargers want to go in a different direction. So that's the change there. And you probably have a Bruce Arians who says, hey, we'd probably be pretty good if our quarterback didn't throw 100 interceptions. So maybe they would go the Phillip Rivers route and only throw 50 interceptions. Maybe they'll go that way.
All right, John McMullen, of course, Football at 4. We do it every day. And the Eagles did make a couple of changes, by the way. Some familiar names. Do you have any idea what Brent Selleck, Darren Sproles, and Connor Barwin role is with this team, along with Jeremiah Washburn?
Well, for Brent Selleck and Darren Sproles, and I found this. I joked about this before at Howie's season-ending press conference, because we all knew at the time Connor Barwin was going to be named, was going to be a part of the personnel department, and he made that whole spew about having too much sentimentality, and then he got all excited. We're going to have some exciting personnel department hires. And who do they hire? Connor Barwin, Darren Sproles, Brent Selleck. No sentimentality there. Is there?
Right. None at all, right? And then there's a couple other names that I did not mention who are going to be a part of the front office as well. Tom Hunkel, Ted Rath, and I mentioned Washburn. Who is that? Washburn's son?
Yeah, that's Jim's son. He has the most interesting. That's the most important one. Obviously, people will look at. I mean, Selleck and Sproles are just sort of no-show jobs, for the lack of a better term. They're just going to try to stick their toes in the pool of scouting and personnel, see if they like it, and see if they have an aptitude as really smart players. But they're not really. They're just consultants. They're not going to be a key aspect of the day-to-day, whereas Connor Barwin is going to be at the facility. He's going to be in the He's going to be there every day. He's part of the organization. But Washburn, it's interesting because he's taking Andy Weidl's old job before Andy got promoted. So as Andy Weidl was to Joe Douglas, that's what Washburn is to Andy Weidl now. And he's going to be a senior defensive assistant, and he's going to help mainly with the defensive line. So that's the most interesting one to me because of the dual role. He's going to have a very important personnel job, and he's also going to be on the field helping with coaching. You do not see that often. So that's the most interesting one to me. You mentioned Rath. Controversy there because he was charged with sexual assault, got acquitted last summer. He's probably most famous. You guys probably saw that video being Sean McVay's get-back coach.
Huh.
He's the guy who would pull Sean McVay back.
How do you get that job?
That's a great job.
I would love that job.
Benefits on that?
Yeah.
401k?
Well, he's also,
I hear the market's doing pretty well.
He's also going to run the
Match?
essentially. And he and Hunko was here in the Andy Reid. He's coming back. He was here when Andy Reid and Rick Burkhalter were here. He went to Minnesota with Eric Sugarman, who was an assistant to Rick Burkhalter here. So he's coming back. And those two guys are essentially going to run the department, which includes the training staff, the strength and conditioning staff, the sports science staff, all that. Those two guys are going to run that.
All right, he's John McMullen. We do it every day. Football at 4 at JF McMullen. You can hit him up over there, and of course, he appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, John, have a great weekend.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, John.
And of course, Johnny Mac back on Monday with more Football at 4. We'll recap some XFL.